Hello. It's been a while since we've just sat on the floor and talked about a book. In my 2025 yearly wrap-up, I told you guys that I finished out the year with Mate by Ali Hazelwood, and that while I'm typically a huge Ali Hazelwood fan, this one actually did not really work for me that well, and I didn't love it. I asked if you wanted more info. Bunch of people wanted more info, so that's what we're going to talk about today. If you are somehow not familiar with Ali Hazelwood, she is a very famous contemporary romance author, and recently she has been taking a little bit of a foyer into fantasy romance. The first was with a book called Bride, and the second is with this book, Mate. I have read both of them. I liked Bride a lot more than I liked this one. They take place in the same universe, which is a version of the United States where there are werewolves and vampires and humans instead of just humans, but nobody's a secret. Like, everybody knows about each other. It's not like there's a secret underground world of werewolves and vampires. It's kind of a modern day society, what if there were all of these creatures sort of situation. The female main character of the first book, Bride, and the female main character of this book are best friends slash sisters. They grew up together. They're kind of adopted sisters in a way. Misery is the female main character of the first book, and she's a vampire, and Serena is the main character of this book, and she is a half human, half werewolf hybrid. She is also the first that they know of these hybrids, but they do know of another one who's much younger than her, who's the male love interest from Bride's younger sister, Anna, I think is how you're supposed to say it. I don't know if it's Anna or Anna. Serena ends up making the decision to come forward with the fact that she's a hybrid, despite the fact that this would put a target on her back, because there's a lot of vampires out there who would not want people to know that there's a possibility for humans and werewolves to mate and have children, because that might make them gang up on the vampires. People are kind of also starting to rumor that there's another hybrid out there besides just Serena, so she decides to go super public with the situation just to bring all of the attention on her so people don't look for Anna, because she's like a 7-year-old girl and she wants to protect her, right? Where do we start with this book? Where does this book start? I wish I could tell you without giving a spoiler warning, and this is one of my complaints about this book. We will dive into spoilers in a minute, but I want to give a bit of a no spoiler review anyway, in case some of you guys are thinking about reading this. But part of my problem with this is that it really is very hard for me to simply explain what goes down in this book, because it takes so many turns, and not in a way that worked, at least for me. I know some people are really loving this, so hey, maybe I'm wrong. It didn't feel intentional. It didn't feel seamless. It felt all over the place. It felt like we were just getting ping-ponged around, and on one page, the main conflict we were dealing with is this, but then you turn the page and it's a different main conflict, and then you turn another page and it's a different main conflict. And that's different than having multiple conflicts that weave together, and I didn't end up liking it that much, unfortunately, at the end. I did still give it a 3 stars because I love Ali Hazelwood. I love her writing. I love a good pining book, and basically all of her books involve some element of pining. And so the good parts were really, really, really good, and I really enjoyed them. But the bad parts for me were unfortunately really bad and kind of hard to get through, and that's what made it a really middle-of-the-road 3 rating for me. I just don't think this is her best work, and I honestly think that it's kind of a symptom of an issue that she's running into, where basically everything she writes has the same dynamic between the two main characters, and that seems to be what she likes to write, which is great because it works for me. It's mostly worked for me in the past. The female main character is very self-deprecating. She doesn't think very highly of herself, and the male main character is obsessed with her and just pines after her the whole book. And that is the dynamic of basically all of the books she's ever written. And that's a dynamic that works on me. That's something I typically enjoy a lot, and that's why I like her writing so much. And I think if that's not a dynamic that you would enjoy, then you wouldn't really like any of her books. But I think you especially wouldn't like this one, because I do think that's what carried it for me. I think I probably would have rated it lower than that if it wasn't for that typical Ali Hazelwood writing and interactions between the main characters that I do really enjoy. That being said, we're going to dive into spoilers so I can tell you exactly what frustrated me about this book so much. When the book starts, Serena is isolated at a cabin in the woods. She knows the reason why, but we the reader don't know why, and no other character in the story knows why she wants to be alone by herself in a cabin in the woods. And we also know that Cohen, who is the male main character of this book, did mate towards her, but the mating bond can be one way. So as of right now, we only know that Cohen has mated with Serena, but we do not think that Serena has mated back in the other direction. And we also know that Cohen doesn't really have any interest in being with her, and has told her that the mating thing is just a sexual thing for wolves, and that it's really not that big a deal, and that he doesn't really have any actual interest in her. So she thinks that Cohen's not really into her. And And the book starts with her getting attacked in the middle of the night by a vampire who's trying to kill her because there's a big hit out on her head because, as I've already mentioned, some of the vampires are worried about the humans and the werewolves knowing that they can mate and have children because that might lead to them ganging up on the vampires of the world, right? Cohen goes to pick her up and to help her, and he insists upon keeping her near him after this because he's worried for her safety. And the first few chapters of this book are genuinely infuriating. At least they were for me, because you have Serena, who, you're inside of her mind. We get no perspective from Cohen except these little flashes at the beginning of chapters. We, the reader, don't know why Serena wants to self-isolate. And she keeps thinking to herself, if only they knew why, if only they knew why, if only they knew what was going on. And so you know something's happening. You know there's a reason why, but we don't find out what that reason is until a solid few chapters into the book. And so you read a lot of these chapters of her interacting with all of these people who really want to help her and her just shoving them away from herself, but you don't know why she's doing that. And you don't have a tangible reason. I almost ended up as pissed off at her as all the other characters in the book were at that point in time, of like, dude, just let us help you. Tell us what's going on. Like, why won't you just open up to us, blah, blah, blah. And she's just like, no, I can't. And it's genuinely really frustrating. And I don't know if we'd known right at the beginning if that would have been better, like if we'd have known the reason why. But honestly, even after finding out the reason, that feeling doesn't get that much better, because the reason ends up being that she is dying from some wolf illness. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's some like cortisol spike disorder where in the middle of the night, she gets these flashes of high cortisol, like high stress in her body, and they're really, really bad. And no doctor that she's seen has been able to help her. And they think that she's so resistant to the medication and the treatment because she's a hybrid. And so she's dying. And they keep telling her that eventually she's going to have one of these flashes that is severe enough that she has a heart attack from the stress and she doesn't survive it. And they give her a prognosis of months to live. Part of why she's isolating is because during these flashes, she can be dangerous to the people around her, and she knows that there are people who care about her who would insist on trying to be near her and trying to help her, but she doesn't want to put them at risk, and she doesn't want to put their safety at risk, so that's why she's trying to self-isolate. I was annoyed before finding that out because I was like, man, what could this thing possibly be that she's trying to hide? And when I found it out, I wanted to have a little bit of patience because I know that with very serious news and prognosis like that, it can be very hard to share it with your loved ones because you know it's going to upset them. And I have heard stories in the past of people hiding the fact that they're dying from their family because they don't want to tell them. And so I don't want to act like that's something that would never happen in real life, right? And then you have the added layer of the fact that she knows that she's a danger to the people around her and she doesn't want to harm them. And so these things add up together to, at the very least, give her a good justification for why she is keeping this a secret. But that second aspect of it falls apart almost immediately upon her moving in with Cohen so that he can protect her from the vampires targeting her, because he has no idea about this right at first. Because she has the thought to herself, well, Cohen's the alpha of the pack. In fact, he's the single most powerful werewolf I've ever seen or met. So even if I tried to hurt him in the middle of the night, I really don't think I could. So it's actually probably going to be fine to live with him. Well, okay. So then why were you so worried about hurting the people who care about you? Like, if Cohen is one of those people and you know you're not going to hurt him even if you try in the middle of the night during one of these episodes, why would it be a problem? And not only that, even if she didn't think Cohen cares about her, because at this point in time he's keeping his feelings under lock and key, you know, classic Ali Hazelwood. Again, I'm into that part. I don't mind that part. Her best friend Misery is married to, I'm pretty sure his name is Lo. Don't quote me on that. I also actually don't know if they're technically married, but that's who she's with, and that's who the first romance was between Misery and, again, I think his name is Lo. But Lo is like the second most powerful werewolf she's ever met, and he is also like this uber powerful alpha. Even if, again, she'd had an episode in the middle of the night and was trying to hurt people, he would be able to handle it too. She does tell this story of waking up in Anna's bed and being really freaked out that she was going to harm Anna and not wanting to tell Misery and Lo what was going on, and so that's why she left. Anna is the 7-year-old girl, right? But still, it's like if she had just told Lo, then they probably could have set up a sleep situation where he would have been in between her and anybody else that she could have hurt, and it all would have worked out. So all of that to say, I get it. I get why the motivations were there. Here's the problem with that in a book, though, because with this being a romance, you know that eventually Cohen is going to find this out. And most likely, once he finds it out, that is going to kick off the aspect of the narrative that solves that for them. So even if there are these reasonings behind why it is the case, and if it maybe would be something that would happen in real life, in the narrative, it ends up feeling like a miscommunication trope. Even though it's not miscommunication between the two of them, it's an active deception situation, you just know that in order for the romance to play out, he's going to have to find out what's going on, and then the two of them are going to tackle it together. So you're just waiting for that to get cleared up. And so for the first half of this book, I would say, I was so irritated. And the only thing that was carrying me through was the pining that I knew was going on, and also just the ease of Ali Hazelwood's writing, like how easy it is to just turn the pages and read the lines. Like that really helped too. But I found myself just so irritated, feeling like I was just waiting for Cohen to find out that she was sick. Because once he found it out, then the rest of the narrative was going to move forward, and we were really kind of stagnant in their relationship until then. And also, Cohen is being distant towards her, and he has a reason for that, and you know that we're going to find out what that reason is, and then that's also going to drive the narrative forward. So all of this time that we spent with Serena not knowing why Cohen doesn't want to be with her, and Cohen not knowing that Serena is dying, just feels like wasted page space to me, the reader. And I spent the whole time feeling like I was just flipping the pages, biding my time until the two of them cleared all of this up, which is why I'm saying it's like a form of a miscommunication trope. Even if it's more of an active deception than a miscommunication, it has the same problems that a miscommunication trope has, which is that there's no real conflict there. It's just solved by the fact that they talk to each other. At some point, we end up finding out that the reason why Cohen is being distant is because he had to take a vow of celibacy as the alpha. So he can't have any relationships with anybody, because then if he's in a relationship, and especially if he's in a relationship with his mate, then he could potentially put the needs of his mate above the needs of the pack. We hear a bunch of stories of the not even that distant past, but things that happened with Cohen's parents, where his dad got kidnapped and his mom was the alpha, and she went to go get his dad because she couldn't stand the idea of him being in pain, and ends up herself getting kidnapped and killed. And this allows this cult that was kind of targeting the pack to kill a bunch of the adults in the pack and forced Cohen to become alpha at like 15 to deal with this whole situation. So Cohen does have active reason to believe in this vow of celibacy and believe in the idea that he should not really have any relationships because he has to put the needs of the pack first. So that's why he's being distant. That I don't really have an issue with existing in the narrative. I do have an issue with our main character not knowing about it because, again, it just has this miscommunication trope feel, and it just felt like we were waiting to find out whatever his reasoning was for not being able to be in a relationship with her, and that the plot and the romance between them just couldn't even really move forward until we found that out. So why are we putting it off? Why not just have us find that out so we can start solving these things, right? But my other big issue with the she's dying being the big secret that she doesn't want anybody to know is that she's not actually dying. And essentially, Cohen finds out that this is what's going on about halfway through the book, and he insists upon taking her to a doctor that he knows, who is immediately able to figure out what's actually wrong with her, despite the fact that she's allegedly seen countless doctors about this and none of them have been able to figure it out. Now, here's the thing. I am actually, unfortunately, very aware of the fact that this is how the medical world works in real life. And you could see a million doctors and none of them could figure out what was wrong, and then you just see the right doctor and they just figure it out. So maybe I shouldn't complain about that too much, but again, does it have points for realism? Potentially. Does that make it a good narrative though? And I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but especially in a romance novel where you know they're going to end up together in the end, part of the fun of it is figuring out how you get from point A to point B. And if the whole half of the book we've been building up with this, she's dying, we're going to have to figure out how to save her life, and then he finds out that she's dying, he has her see a specific doctor that he really loves and respects, and then all of a sudden that doctor is able to figure it out, and it turns out she's not dying at all, and every other doctor was wrong about what's wrong with her. Well, now there's nothing to solve. There's nothing we have to do to save her. There's nothing we have to do to like figure this out or help her in any way. So all of this conflict for the first half of the book just basically is gone. And now we're starting almost over from scratch, and now we have a new conflict to go out for the rest of the book. So that's why I was saying it's so hard to give a summary of what the premise of this book is, because the premise of the first half of the book is she's secretly dying and she doesn't want to tell him. And then they find out halfway through that she's not actually dying at all. That just gets brushed right over. All of the characters just move on in the narrative. Turns out she's gonna live. Yay! She has like one moment thinking about this and then it's just all fine and dandy. And then the rest of the book, the main conflict is that he's the alpha and he has a vow of celibacy, but what was actually wrong with her? I'm so glad you asked. She's going into heat. So that's one of the things that's really interesting about these books, is that they borrow from Omegaverse lore sort of situation, but a lot of where the Omegaverse structure came from was actually from how wolves mate. And so there is kind of this weird interconnection of it where Omegaverse was partially based off of how sexual interactions happen between wolves, and the characters in these books are werewolves. So the word Omega is never used, and this isn't marketed as an Omegaverse book, but there are aspects of how the relationship between alphas and omegas go that mirror some of what happens with Serena and Cohen. And one of those things is that Serena is actually going into heat. And so what these cortisol flashes in the middle of the night actually are not actually her having these major stress reactions, but what's actually happening is she's getting super horny. She's getting really horny and she doesn't have her alpha around to help her solve that, and that's what's causing her body so much stress. Her body was under so much stress that she potentially was going to have a heart attack, and she had a prognosis of a few months to live, and it turned out that all she needed was a little bit of dick. And so that felt a little silly as a resolution to that plot line. Made me bat my eyes a little bit. I don't want to be the friend that's too woke, but people deal with family having terminal illness in real life. Myself being one of those people. Very lucky that my dad lived. Love you, Dad. But my dad did have stage 4 throat and lung cancer. So I know what it feels like to low-key be afraid that somebody's not going to be around and they're going to be sick and they're going to need a bunch of treatment and all that stuff. And it just felt like a really flippant way to deal with something that's actually very, very serious, to bring that into the narrative and to have that resolve in that way. It's like, oh, you thought your loved one was dying. No, it turns out that they actually just need to get fucked. I wish I could think it was funny. And I do kind of feel like I'm being the friend that's too woke right now, like I said, where I'm like, I just don't know. I just really didn't like it. I didn't like how flippantly the she's gonna die plotline wrapped up. And I really, really didn't like that the solution just ended up being that she needed to get dick down and then her body would feel fine. Like, what? I don't know. Do you guys think I'm being crazy about that? Like, is that not like just a really kind of egregious way to handle that? So that really threw me off, especially with the fact that from that point on, Serena basically has one moment where she's like, whoa, I'm gonna live. That's crazy. And then the rest of the narrative just plays out. And then we just know she's gonna live now. She's just going into heat, basically. And so if you're not familiar in the Omegaverse world, heat is kind of like this multi-day period in which the Omega is ridiculously horny. And I believe in true Omegaverse it happens like once a month. It's kind of like a period, but it seems in this universe it happens every so often. And so in the months leading up to it, you have these flashes in the night that are kind of prepping you for it, and then you have this multi-day period. And as long as you have somebody there to help you through these urges, then you're fine. And this happens all the time in the wolf world. I will say that on the whole, doctors not figuring it out, and then this one doctor figured it out sort of thing, with it being this common a thing in the wolf world, I did find it kind of unbelievable that they didn't figure it out. And the only kind of flippant reason we were given is because she's a hybrid, and so apparently it doesn't manifest exactly how it manifests in the full werewolves. But I still just think if it's that common in the werewolf world for this to happen to the female werewolves, then I do feel like it's something that one of the other doctors potentially would have thought of, but whatever. So there's this massive plot twist halfway through that is just that Serena isn't actually dying. She's just going into her heat, but they're still in a situation where her alpha, Cohen, is also the alpha of the pack and cannot be in a relationship with her as a result. So whatever are they gonna do? And the rest of the book is really more about this. And so it's kind of like two different books in one, with this very distinct midpoint where we shift what the main conflict is. But I will say that despite me complaining about that extensively just now, I actually actually enjoyed the second half of this book a lot more than I enjoyed the first half, because all of those elements that were really annoying me were gone. We no longer had this form of a miscommunication trope where you just like were waiting basically for everyone to clear everything up. Now they had cleared it up, and now we were actually just moving through solving whatever conflict was still there, which on one hand is the her going into heat and having her alpha very close to her, but him not really being able to interact with her sexually because of the celibacy aspect of him being the alpha of the pack. But there also seems to be this cult situation, the cult that had attacked Cohen's parents in the past and also had attacked their whole pack and had killed a bunch of people way back in the day, is rearing its ugly head and coming back around. And so that's kind of happening in the background as well. And it did lead to some very steamy, very fun scenes where they're using some loopholes. Cohen kind of has this perspective that helping her deal with her horniness is not the same thing. Like, it's almost like as long as he doesn't come, it's fine. He hasn't broken his vow of celibacy. So he can get her off, and as long as he doesn't get off actually with her, as long as he just goes and jerks off afterwards, then they're fine, and it doesn't count as breaking the vow of celibacy. I don't know if that's actually true in spirit, but it did lead to some pretty steamy scenes, and so I'm here for it, and I just thought it was really funny. But once again, this is another situation where there's all of this conflict built up surrounding them being in proximity to each other, and what are they going to do and how are they going to handle this? Cohen is trying to play off to everybody that he doesn't really care about her. The people close to him see right through it, and people keep telling her, especially because they don't think she's mated to Cohen and she doesn't think she's mated to Cohen, that really anybody can help her through this. And so she just needs to pick someone. But she doesn't want anybody but Cohen, and we do kind of find out at the end that she is mated back to him, so they are, you know, a mating bond both ways, and that's why she didn't really want anybody else. But again, it just wraps up so quickly, where the solution to that ends up being that all of Cohen's seconds swear to guard them and make sure that nobody interrupts them when they're actually in the midst of dealing with her situation. And for all of them to just be like, yeah, we'll keep his secret. It would be torture for you and torture for him for the two of you to not be together during this time. So why don't you guys just do it? And then afterwards, you can just leave this area and go and move back in with Misery and Lo, and he can stay the alpha and you two won't be in a relationship and it'll all be fine. So even all of this buildup of them trying to figure out how to be together during this time ends up leading to nothing. And the solution just ends up being everybody being okay with the fact that they're doing that and agreeing to lie to the rest of the pack and the council and all of that about the fact that they were going to do it. So then we do get some pretty steamy scenes between her and Cohen, which were fun to read. Listen, I'm a fan of romance, I'm a fan of smut, okay? And if you like Ali Hazelwood smut scenes, you'll like this book. You get a lot of that. Then out the other side of it, again, there's just no like real actual conflict, it feels like. And I feel like I'm really starting to like come to terms with what I actually didn't like about this book now that I've talked it all out, is that it doesn't really feel like there was any actual true conflict. Every time there was the illusion of conflict, it ended up getting resolved very quickly or very easily when that resolution came around. And so we had like 4 or 5 sources of conflict throughout the book that it's just like, oh, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. Oh, I guess it's not a problem anymore. We can all just move on. And that's basically how all of the conflict went in the book. Throughout the final few chapters, Serena is really bummed about the fact that her and Cohen are going to have to separate, and Cohen is obviously bummed about it too, but they want to deal with this whole cult situation first. And so Serena convinces Cohen to allow her to be bait at some point and to allow her to get kidnapped by them so that he could pretend to go try and rescue her by himself, but in reality he brought a bunch of other people with him. They end up freeing her from that, but then she gets kidnapped for realsies a second time. I'm honestly forgetting. She gets kidnapped a second time, and I feel like it's another bait situation, or was the first time, was she not actually bait? I forget. I feel like at some point she gets kidnapped and she was bait, and at the other point she gets kidnapped and she wasn't bait. It might have actually been the first time she got kidnapped that it wasn't on purpose. All of that to say that the second time they're a little bit smarter about it, and they don't actually have her in the spot that they told everybody she was going to be in, or, you know, whatever. She ends up freeing herself, finding her way to where the battle is actually happening, and she puts her life on the line for Cohen, ends up saving him, but she's not actually that injured by it, and it all works out in the end. And the council ends up deciding to allow her and Cohen to be together because they proved to the council throughout all of this that Cohen is not as much of a, I don't know if slave would be the right word, to his mateship with her as his parents had been, and the fact fact that he did allow her to put herself at risk by doing an intentional kidnapping, and that also she put her life on the line for him, and she was willing to give him up to give him back to the pack because she was going to leave beforehand. Everybody's basically like, oh, okay, it looks like it's not actually going to be that big a problem for you guys to be together, and it's not actually going to make it that much more difficult for him to be the alpha of the pack, and so we're actually fine with you two being together, and it all worked out. I actually would not mind that ending if it wasn't for the number of times we'd had things wrap up so nicely up to that point. Like I said, the theme of this book just feels like it's a bunch of buildup of a conflict that turns out to be nothing, and so there's no actual satisfaction in the resolutions because there's no real resolution. There's no work to the resolution is maybe a better way to word it. Like, there's all this buildup, all this buildup, all this tension, and then it's just like, oh, that's actually not a problem anymore. Oh my God, she's dying, she's dying, she's dying, she's dying. Oh, no, it turns out she's actually not dying. We don't have to go on a journey to find some cure for her. We don't have to do something else to figure it out. She just needs to get a little bit of dick, and then she'll be fine. And oh my God, she's going into heat and they can't have sex. Oh, what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do? Oh, turns out they actually just can. Again, no work goes into actually creating that situation for them. They don't actually have to do anything to create that situation for themselves. It just turns out that everybody around them is okay with them doing it and is gonna turn a blind eye and lie to everybody else who isn't going to be near them in this time, so they're not going to know about it, and so it's fine, and it's actually not going to be a problem. And then it's like, oh, well, okay, they have this short period of time together, but then they're not going to be able to be together long term because he supposedly has this vow of celibacy, and in the end, everybody's perfectly fine with them staying together. The reason why that one feels more okay for me is because it was worked for, right? So we saw how he let her get kidnapped, and he was, I mean, he wasn't really like okay with it, but he allowed it to happen. And we saw her stand up for him, and we saw all of these things that then the council then saw to say, you know what, you changed our minds. We actually do feel like you guys are going to be fine to be together, and it's not going to put the pack at risk. So we're really cool with this. Like, that felt like a worked for resolution to that plot line, and that's why that didn't feel nearly as cheap as the other two. But really, this book felt like it had three distinct arcs. There was the arc where you thought Serena was dying, and then it turned out she wasn't. Then there was the arc of her needing just desperately to get dick or she is going to die, and that also ended up being fine in the end. And then we have this third arc with the cult, and that's the arc that actually has a satisfying ending, but that's not until the very, very, very end of the book. I just ended up spending the majority of this book being like, what? I don't know. It was so disappointing because I'm just such a fan of Ali Hazelwood and I like so many of her books, but this one just didn't work for me. I said something at the beginning of the video about how I feel like it's a marker of the fact that her writing this same trope over and over and over again is starting to become a problem for her, and I think she's starting to have to add in all of this other stuff to make there still be something to read for, because she's just written the same trope over and over and over again. And so we're starting to get like more and more ridiculous plot lines and storylines that just like, I don't know, they're just not satisfying. I like I said, I've seen a bunch of people say that they actually liked this one better than they liked Bride. And so I know there's a bunch of people out there who don't agree with me, and there's a bunch of people out there who actually think this is better than Bride. I'm not one of those people. I don't remember a ton from Bride. I read it a few years ago, but I remember liking it significantly more than I liked this. I do not remember feeling nearly this frustrated with it at so many points. And I really just feel like this book was 3 books in one, and 2 of them did not have very satisfying endings. So the final ending might have worked, but you had to get through a lot to get there. And a lot of it was kind of frustrating or difficult to read. I don't know if this is going to be like something people don't agree with me on, but I think it kind of says something that all of the quotes on the copy of the book that I have are for Bride and not for this one. So there's this quote on the front and these 2 quotes on the back, and all 3 of them are for Bride, not for this book. I feel like that kind of says something, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, Ali Hazelwood is still going to be an auto pickup for me. I think the only books of hers I haven't read are some of her short story collections, and then I do want to read Check and Mate. I've heard really good things about it. I just know it's also a YA, so I don't gravitate towards it as much as I gravitate towards her other books. You know what I'm saying? I do want to pick that one up because I have heard good things about it, and I've heard the romance in it is really good. Whereas in this one, I thought the smut was really good, but I didn't think the romance itself was very good. That's gonna be it for me today, you guys. If you guys have read this, definitely comment and let me know what you think, because I'm open to reading why other people really liked this book. I'm generally a fan of Ali Hazelwood. She's still on my auto pickup list. I just think this one was kind of sad and disappointing for me. So I'm curious to see what you guys think. And with that, I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!